Hey guys, one of our patrons saw a video that we made a couple of months ago talking about Samurai William and Shogun, the old TV series, and a new book about William Adams. So those of you who haven't seen that video yet, have a look at that, because that explains the whole William Adams thing and all the rest of that, the old Shogun series. This video is going to be talking about this year's series, so 2024, the TV series Shogun. So I hadn't seen it, and one of the patrons said, "Have you seen it?" No, and he said he really liked it. Check it out. So I have been watching it, and it is pretty good. I do like it. I've watched a few episodes, and I'm going to be watching it till the end because it is good. Just first of all, just want to clarify a couple of things. One is that James Clavell wrote the original Shogun book, and he based that book loosely on the life of William Adams, who was the first Englishman to come to Japan. So Clavell's book was pretty loosely based on the story of William Adams, and then this TV series that they've released this year is loosely based on Clavell's book. So in other words, historically, it's loosely accurate as to what was going on at the time. And then as far as, I mean, they haven't even called him William Adams, they've called him John Blackburn, and Unjin. So they've got creative license, basically. So historically, it's not the most accurate. If I remember, I'll put a link underneath this video to the new book that was written about William Adams that is historically accurate, and probably one of the best researched books on the topic ever written. So if I remember, I'll put a link to it underneath this video. So if you're interested in the history of that particular time, that's probably the book to read. However, the great things about this series, the 2024 series, is it's been really well made. It sort of reminded me, when I started watching it, it reminded me of some good Japanese movies that I've seen set back at that time, because you can imagine a movie made by Japanese people about Japanese history is often really, really good, because it's set in Japan, it's made in Japan, all the characters are Japanese, it's written by Japanese people, so it's about as authentic as you can get, compared to Hollywood, where Last Samurai came from, which was an okay movie, but when you get the Hollywood perspective on Japanese history or Japanese life, usually it's the Hollywood perspective, However, what struck me with this one is it really reminded me of watching a Japanese movie about old times, Japanese history, It's really well made. The writers, it seems, were a mix of Japanese people and non-Japanese people. The characters, the actors are 99% Japanese people. There's very few foreigners in the series at all. So the Japanese language in it is amazing. They use reiko, they use the polite Japanese when it's the important people talking, and then when you got just the average guys talking, they use normal Japanese. So from that point of view, the language is really good as well. For those of you, obviously, if you're watching our videos, you're into Japanese stuff, you'll appreciate all of this because it's really good. The Japanese language in it's really good. If you can, watch it without subtitles, because it gives you the more authentic experience. Of course, the costuming's amazing. The scenery, the scenery, the settings, the landscape is amazing. Some of the scenery is just absolutely amazing. It was really well shot, really well directed. The buildings are very well done. We've actually shown you videos of old castles and old temples and old buildings that are 400 years old, which is when this is set, right? This is set turn of the end of the 16th century, and some of the buildings, they've really nailed it. It's really, really good. So aesthetically, they're nailing it. And then a couple other things I liked. It seems like it was written by either Japanese people who've lived in other countries, or it might be the influence of some non-Japanese people who've lived for a long period of time in Japan, because his reaction, the character, the English character, his reaction to stuff that happens around him, the Japanese culture, is really relatable for someone who's lived in Japan for a long time. It's really relatable how he reacts to a lot of the Japanese stuff, because what often happens is when you get a Hollywood perspective on Japan, often it's idealized, and you know, the foreigner comes to Japan and just loves it and everything's perfect and everything's wonderful, and there's some aspects of that to this where you see all these things that are great, but as he's living in Japan, there are a lot of things that are really great, but there's a lot of things culturally and in day-to-day life that are really frustrating, right? And watching that has been really, really good, like really relatable for me, because those sorts of movies and things where you get those people, you know, the foreigner comes to Japan and loves it and it's all perfect, that's very difficult for someone who's lived here long term to relate to, because, you know, while it's nice to focus on all the positive stuff, it's just not realistic, right? As we've said a million times with our videos, we make videos about anything and everything about Japan, and some of it's hard to live with, as is every country, right? Every country has things that are hard to live with. So anyway, he'd had this particular episode, he'd had just one thing after another happening that was frustrating him. So he had this lady that works as his translator, which again is poetic license, because that's not quite how it worked, but there's this lady that's acting as his translator, and she explained to him that in Japanese life you've got the 8-fold screen that everybody hides their personality behind, right? And that, you know, you should never show your true self to anybody, right? And so she told him that, and he's going, oh, how do you deal with that? And I'll try to say these things without spoiling anything. Those of you who haven't seen the series yet, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but there was a series of things that happened. You know, someone was killed unnecessarily because of a Japanese culture thing, and then she explained to him that we live and then we die, you know, and it doesn't matter. And he was just getting more and more frustrated, you know, and then his translator was beaten up by her husband, and he was really annoyed about that, and she's just saying to him, don't react to it, don't react to it. And those of you who've lived in Japan long term would have experienced all those things. You know, I've experienced all those things. I had that particular scene reminded me, I was standing outside a restaurant once with the owner of the restaurant, Japanese guy, and a Chinese guy had tried to get in, and there was no bookings available. And this Chinese guy, a bit of a mafia type he was, and he was losing it, and he was abusing the staff. And I stood up, right? And the owner of the restaurant said, sit down, don't say anything, right? And it was similar to this scene where, you know, you don't react. And so he had a series of these things happen, this Japanese culture stuff where, you know, don't show your real feelings, you know, you don't know what that person's real feelings is. A whole heap of typical stuff. One lady had a set of swords that she believed belonged to someone special and been passed down through the family, and in actual fact someone had just bought them cheaply from somewhere and given them to someone else, and everybody knew it, but they were letting her believe it because it made her feel better. And all these things that really ring a bell to anybody that lives in Japan long term. You know, we've had experiences like that all the time where something's not true, but everyone just pretends it's true because it makes someone feel better, you know. And so there was a whole heap of these things, one after another, and he was really hating it. It was just like one thing after another, and he couldn't handle it. And finally he said, in English, he said, fuck Japan, I'm going home. Right? And it was just a classic. It was just a classic, because anybody who's not Japanese, who's lived in Japan long term, would have experienced that feeling at least once. You know, fuck Japan, I'm going home, he said in English. And the Lord who he was serving wouldn't let him leave. That's actually true. The William Adams story was similar. William Adams wanted to leave and go home to England because he had a wife and kids back in England, and he wanted to go home to England, and they wouldn't let him leave. The Lord wouldn't let him leave because he was too valuable. The information that he had was too valuable, you know. So So it was really good. I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed. Keeping in mind that it's, you know, a high percentage of what we're watching is fiction. It is extremely realistically written and realistically presented, and it is really, really good. So I'd recommend it. Anybody is obviously, you guys, if you're watching our videos, you're interested in Japan, I'd recommend it to you. Just visually, it's really well done. I've got to admit, I enjoyed that about The Last Samurai when I watched it. I mean, that was a pretty good visually presented movie, you know, and there were some good things in there. You know, the guy that greeted him, the Portuguese guy that greeted him when he arrived and told him, welcome to the land where nobody speaks the truth, or something like that. There were a couple of lines in that movie that were pretty good, but overall, you know, it was a Hollywood thing. The American guy shows up and saves the day, sort of thing. It's a bit heavy, but this one's much better. This is really good. The original series, you know, what was the original Shogun series, was 30-40 years ago. It was quite a while ago, and that was pretty good. That was well made. But obviously, you know, they've got a lot of technology now. They can make the visual, you know, they had one scene where they came into Osaka and they showed Osaka from the air, and brilliant, you know, brilliant. You could, you know, here's the town, here's Osaka the city, here's the castle and the buildings and the temples and all the old buildings, and you know, it looked like you were looking at Osaka 400 years ago. You know, so it is really well done. So we'd recommend it. So those of you who haven't seen it yet, I hope I haven't spoiled anything, but that one line sticks out in my head, because you know it happens anywhere. I mean, I remember having that feeling in Australia when I lived in Australia. It used to make me crazy sometimes the way some people behaved in Australia. So anywhere you live, I'm sure all you guys, wherever you live, have experienced that feeling where you're sick of it. You know, I'm sick of this place, you know. But it was just such a classic, because so relatable. You know, the foreigner comes to Japan. Oh, they refer to him, not everybody, but a lot of the people refer to him as the barbarian, which is like gaijin. You know, when we get called gaijin here, it feels a little bit like that. Gaijin, you know, the outsider, and when the Japanese people are talking, they refer to him as the barbarian, you know, and that feeling of everybody sort of looking down on you as sort of being that it's a feeling that people are looking at you like that, but it's not always true. I mean, occasionally it's true, you know. Some people definitely give you the hairy eyeball, you know. Oh, there's a foreigner. You know, it does happen, and as I've told you guys before, you get the occasional old person who'll actually say something. You know, I was talking to a policeman once on the street, and a old Japanese guy walked past and said, so what do you say, gaijin wa dame, foreigners are no good, right? And he gets a bit of that, you know. And so a lot of the stuff they've written into it, I would suggest that it's a combination of Japanese people who've spent a lot of time outside Japan, and probably non-Japanese people who've spent a lot of time in Japan, who've written this stuff, because someone who just visited Japan for a week wouldn't have noticed it. You know, you'd have to live here for a period of time before you start to notice a lot of that stuff. And subtle, a lot of it's really subtle, but and sort of quiet. You know, Japanese people's style. You know, that old guy was a rare exception. It'd be pretty rare for someone to yell something at you walking down the street, but it's more quiet than that. They sort of whisper to each other. And old people are funny, because often they'll whisper a little bit too loud, and you walk past and you'll hear one old person say to the other person, oh, look, a foreigner, you know, oh, look, a foreigner. And there was another one, I just remember, I went to an old ryokan once in somewhere, it might have been Kyoto, and I walked in the genkan and sumimasen, you know, and this old guy came out, mata, gaijin desu ne. Again, foreigners. Again, a foreigner. So he'd had too many foreigners in there already, and here was another one, and he wasn't impressed. Again, a foreigner, he said. That was his greeting. Anyway, so yeah, it's good. So to our patron who asked for the comments, oh, that's some wild driving there, wasn't it? Across the pedestrian crossing. To our patron who asked for the comments, that would be my comments. Yeah, he said it was really good. He encouraged me to watch it. So thanks for the recommendation. and now I'm passing the recommendation on to everybody else. Just keep in mind, don't rely on it historically though. There are aspects of it that are historically correct, but it's obviously, you know, creative license has been used to make it more exciting and more interesting, and, you know, make the William Adams character a little bit more central to what's going on than he would have been, and, you know, so yeah, historically it's not a historical document. It's entertainment, but it's really well done, and for people who like Japan, it's very enjoyable. And for people who've spent a lot of time, non-Japanese people who've spent a lot of time in Japan, it's got some little Easter eggs. Is that what they call them? Those little bonuses in there that you come across. Oh, I like that line. I like that line. It has me smiling quite a bit when people say things to him, and, you know, the way he's reacting to, you know, the Japanese culture stuff. It's very relatable for someone who's not Japanese. I was actually watching it on the computer. My wife came in. She was a bit baffled because I don't usually watch Japanese television because most of it's rubbish, you know. And she could hear all this conversation going on in Japanese, and she came in to see what I was watching. And she sat down and watched it with me for a while, and she quite liked it too, because it's really well made, you know. But yeah, she was quite baffled because usually I watch zero Japanese television unless there's something on that I need to watch, like, you know, there's footage from an earthquake or something sort of dramatic happening or interesting happening, news usually. But most Japanese TV I'm not interested. But yeah, she heard this Japanese conversation going on, came in to see what I was watching, and sat and watched it for a while. She was quite impressed. So yeah, it's good. I recommend it. Shogun. Check it out. It's really good. Anyway, that's enough of that. More videos coming soon.